Now that we have a story and we have characters, now it's time to put it in some sense of order. Godard, who was a phenomenal independent storyteller, always said there was no such thing as structure. And finally, a contemporary said to him, at least you have to admit one thing, and that is every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Godard thought about it for a second, and finally he said, yes, but not necessarily in that order. So what's important is that a story does always have, even the most independent thinkers, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. And quite frankly, all that means when people talk to you in screenplay format about 3-act structure, that's all they're saying, is that you have a specific beginning, you have a middle to your story, and you have an end of your story. That's it. That's all it means. So if people ask if your script follows 3-act structure, you can say yes, because it starts somewhere. Now there are certain ways that they quantify what's in the beginning, middle, and end, and we're going to talk about that now. Act 1 is the first quarter of your script. People will try to tell you that has to happen on a certain page. It doesn't. Because if your script is 90 pages, it's going to hit at a different point than if it's 120. But it's the first quarter of your script. Then the Act 2 is the middle half of your script. And the first half is Act 2A, that leads up to a midpoint. Then you have Act 2B, which is the second half of the second act. And then, of course, there's Act 3, which is where the resolution happens. So let's talk about rising action. All right. Now, in each of these portions of the story, there are certain things that happen as guideposts to help you pace your movie properly, so that one piece doesn't last so long that the film gets boring. The reason they break it up into these nuggets is so that you can look at your script and ask yourself, am I getting there fast enough or too fast for people to digest things? So, the first quarter of the script, you're dealing with Act 1. The first thing you do in Act 1 is you establish the protagonist's character flaw, which illustrates why it is they have to change and what they are going to prove with that change in the inner journey to prove your premise. So the first scene of any, it doesn't have to, look, the truth is that there are some action movies where there really are no character arcs. But for me, it's the most effective way to communicate your thought and what you mean. And a film is usually empty if you have nothing to say, and you can't really say much if nobody's learning anything. So, in the first scene, I always put my protagonist in an everyday common conflict, whether it's situational or relationship conflict or something. But when conflict is high, and it's a normal conflict, there's nothing explosive or life-changing. It's just a conflict. And it should suit the genre. So, like, it could be a wedding breakup. It can be, if it's a romantic comedy, it can be, whatever. You realize what the protagonist's flaw is, because if you put them in conflict, they're more likely to reveal. In conflict, we reveal our true selves the most. And we can reveal through conflict what our flaws are. And then something happens. That's called the inciting incident. That is about 10% of the way into your script. The inciting incident is something that happens that makes your protagonist question the way they have lived their life up until that moment, and they realize something's got to change. In Independence Day, aliens come from outer space, and they position themselves all over our planet. That is revealing the true form of the genre. The aliens coming to Earth, we know it's sci-fi. And it's a moment that is, okay, something has to change here. Something is going on. And I'm going to have to do something. And then the end of Act 1, which some people call plot point. I call this escalation 1 and escalation 2. Just to make it clear, these are physical escalations. Escalation 2, which people saw, which Sid Field calls plot point 1, and Michael Haig calls it a turning point 2. You know, everybody has a different term for it. I just say it's an escalation, keep it simple, call it one thing. Escalation 2 is the moment the protagonist makes a decision to do something that will change their life irrevocably forever. And that's what kicks off Act 2. It's right before the end of it's right at the end of Act 1, and this is them deciding to go on their outer journey. Luke Skywalker says, "There's nothing here for me now. I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father." He's going to go with Obi-Wan Kenobi into space, face the bad guys, rescue the princess, and wind up destroying the Death Star. All that is decided, in a sense, in that one moment he makes a decision. And also, it's important to constantly have your protagonist making decisions, because that's what interests us. Though one of the mistakes a lot of people make is having passive protagonists, and kind of decisions are made for them. And a lot of those scripts never get sold or bought because of the fact that the character isn't interesting to follow if they're not making decisions. Now, if the character is making a decision to lay low when they should stand up, that's fine, they're still making a decision. Okay? But they have to make decisions. That's what makes them a protagonist, and characters making decisions are the moments that we're interested in. That's what engages us. Then in Act 2, I'll talk about the pinches in a moment. The first half of Act 2 is building to the midpoint. This midpoint, the belly of the beast, Joseph Campbell and Christopher Vogel call the ordeal, is there something that happens after they make this decision in the middle of the story. You ever notice that you make a decision to do something and you think it's really important, it's a good idea, and then you realize, oh crap, this can go really bad. And you realize the stakes of the decision you've made. This is the moment that is the personification of exactly what they stand to lose. In a violent movie, somebody usually dies. In an action movie, somebody usually dies. or they almost die. Either the protagonist, if it's life and death stakes, death is on the line, and it becomes clear that death is on the line. There are only two stakes, really, that resonate throughout the world that really make sense anywhere you watch it in the world if you want your movie to resonate anywhere. And that is love and life. If life or love is not on the line, you do risk having a story about something that not everybody's going to relate to. But we all want to save our own lives, and we all want to save the people we love or have loved. Yes?
When you say that somebody dies, are we saying one of the reflection characters, or which somebody dies?
Well, that's creative choice.
Uh-huh.
It can just be, so usually it's a reflection character. Or the protagonist has to almost die, and they barely escape with their life. Like they got shot in the shoulder, or whatever. You know, you just have to exemplify the fact that, oh, you made this choice to do this thing, and now, holy crap, this can get really ugly. And then, at the end of Act 2, at the end of Act 2A, you're like, oh crap, the worst can happen. At the end of Act 2B, the worst happens. And not necessarily that they die, but it looks like there's no way they can win. And that this fear is inevitable. Yes?
Okay, I asked earlier, can there be two antagonists? I know that's your answer, but can there be two protagonists?
Yes. But that's usually just for a love story.
Or a buddy movie.
What?
Or a buddy movie.
Most of the time in buddy movies, one of them is a mentor. I have a whole chapter on that, actually. And the question, and it's like, for example, Lethal Weapon. Martin Riggs is a screw loose. He's got a screw loose. You don't think he's a hero at all, right? But he's always in conflict with his partner, Roger Murtaugh. And Murtaugh is just trying to get to retirement alive. And you're thinking originally, oh, well, Murtaugh has the family, the daughter, and everything. He has the love story. So you think that he's going to be the hero of the story. But the truth is that though they are both central characters to the film, Murtaugh is the mentor. He has no change whatsoever. And at the end, Martin Riggs is the one who wants to shoot himself at the beginning. They establish his character by showing he's suicidal. And he has a special bullet he saved to kill himself with because it'll blow out the back of his brain and it'll definitely do the job. And at the end, he gives that bullet to Murtaugh because he's taught him that he wants to live. There are things to live for in this world. Look at
Bad Boys.
I haven't looked at that. I don't have that example on the top of my head, but I should look at that one. But how about Pirates of the Caribbean? William Turner has the love interest. He's the good guy. He's trying to save the girl. He's the mentor. He doesn't change at all. Johnny Depp, Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow, is the one who's a pirate, who's manipulating everything to get the treasure, and then at the end, he has the treasure, he has it in his boat, and he's rowing away, and he decides to risk it all to go back to save the guy. He's the protagonist.
But Will Turner sacrifices himself in that to take over.
Wait, what?
Will Turner, he becomes the captain.
That's the third film, right?
No, that was in
No, in the first film, Will Turner.
Yeah.
Would he have always done that?
I'd have to watch it again, but I don't think he did because I think it was because somebody was going to have to become that.
You're talking about the end of the third film at World's End when he becomes the guy from the ocean, Davy Jones.
No, the other one because
What other one?
I think
The climax of the movie takes place in the cave where they're returning the treasure of all the coins. Is this the one you're talking about?
no because the end of the movie has Elizabeth Swann with her kid on the show.
That's the third film.
That is the third film.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's the
I got
third
that
film.
confused.
Different movie, different storyline. Yeah. I'm talking about the first film. Look at, who here saw the remake of 310 to Yuma? Okay. You'd think that the hero of that story, it's a dual movie. He's a guy who's a cripple who's just trying to get this prisoner to the 310 train to Yuma to serve prison time. And his job is to get him there. And the guy who he's on the trail with is who you think is the antagonist, basically. And he's going with him. He's the prisoner they're keeping to get onto that train. But he never changes. He shows him what it means to be a good person and how to do something to take care of people. And at the end, Ben Wade turns around and kills the actual antagonist, who are his old gang, and he gets on the train voluntarily when he never planned on it. So in the buddy action or buddy movies, often only one of them is the protagonist. Where it's not so is look at and even in romantic movies, a lot of the time it's still really one protagonist. Like let's look at Pretty Woman. In Pretty Woman, he goes from being a businessman who tears things apart to sell off their parts and doesn't care about personal investment in business. And in the end, he changes his motto. And she is a prostitute who has to learn to respect herself and realize that's not what she wants to be doing with her life and decides to go the straight and narrow at the end. Now, they both have character arcs, but she is the one who makes each of the act break decisions. She's the one who decides in the middle whether she will kiss him on the mouth, which changes their relationship. So again, she's the protagonist. The other person can change, but she's the protagonist. In Harry Met Sally, Sally never changes. Harry is the one who thinks that boys and girls can't be friends. And then he realizes they can be friends. It means they shouldn't be lovers. But in the end, he's the one who realizes you can be a friend and a lover. And his is the journey. She never changes. So usually, I focus on one protagonist. And other characters can change throughout your story, as reflection characters often do, led by the changes that happen in the protagonist. Okay. So, worst of all things, And then here, the protagonist faces the antagonist in a final showdown where only one can win. And then in the denouement, you set up the flaw, you put a same kind of conflict situation you had in the opening scene that showed the kind of mistakes that they make. Here you put them in the same kind of situation that they had in the opening of the film, but they're doing it differently now because of everything they learned emotionally from going through all that crap. Does that make sense? So, at the beginning of True Lies, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is on this mission alone. The other guys are in the van, and then he comes home and he's lying to his wife about everything he does. She has no involvement. She thinks he's a boring computer dude. Doesn't know that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a freaking action hero. Okay. But then at the end, she's there on the mission with him, and they're a family again. And they're working together, and their marriage is saved. Same situation, but how he's changed on the inside is reflected in how he does the same things differently now. You had a question.
So the Act 2A, the pinch one midpoint, that's the halfway point, 50% of the script.
Yeah, the pinch one is separate. I haven't done the pinches yet. I'm hitting the ends of each act, so you know where they're going. Now, because what happens is Act 2 is a really wide open space of script. It's half of the length of the script easy, okay? So I like to give myself, before you hit the midpoint, that's a big span of pages, an 120-page script. That's, you have 30 pages to fill to get to that point. So what I make sure I do is the escalations are all about tracking the outer journey. My pinches is where I make sure I'm tracking the inner journey. And I'm tracking the story of the love interest and the protagonist. So I have something to hit in the middle to make sure I'm not leaving the inner journey unexplained and unapproached with the physical journey that's happening. So I'm making sure I'm hitting the inner journey with pinches in the middle of these places. So I have little signposts to hit. Instead of every 30 pages, I have them every 15 pages. Which allows you to break down the scripts into, the more you can quantify how many pages you have to accomplish something, and you break it down into a smaller amount, the easier it is to reach that point. Okay, any questions on this? Yes?
Okay, so can you kind of give us a pinch example? You may not have thought of this before.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I'll give you a pinch example.
Pinch example and then give us the plot.
Yeah.
You see?
Okay, I'll do it in an unlikely example. I'm going to do a romantic comedy. I'm going to take, let's take Pretty Woman. In Pretty Woman, instead of the romantic story being the B plot, which it usually is, the romantic story is the A plot because it's a romantic comedy. So, what I do in that stead is I turn what is the physical outer story, one of the physical outer stories, which is his business plan, and make sure I would hit that in the pinches. So here, he's buying a company, and he intends on tearing it apart, and he meets with them. Right? And they meet for dinner, and this guy, he meets the guy who's buying all the land from the ships, the shipyard, and he's going to tear it up, and he's going to break it off into bits and sell it off and destroy this man's life work because he's going to make a killing at it profit-wise. And then here, he's going to realize, wait a minute, I don't want to change you. I don't want to destroy what you've created. I want to work with you and build ships together.
But
yes.
After Act 2A, midpoint, what is the physical?
She kisses him on the mouth.
Okay, so there. Okay.
She agrees in the decision. They go out on a date. The inciting incident is he pulls over and he picks her up and helps him drive back to his hotel, and he pays her for the night. And then he says, I want to pay you to stay with me for my stay here while I'm in LA for the next week or whatever. And then she has to decide whether she wants to commit to one person for that period of time. And she has a moment where she doesn't want to do it. We have that moment that's called refusal of the call, where they're offered a situation. In the end, she decides, you know what, I'm going to take that money, and I'll be your date during these 2 weeks. That's here. That's the end of Act 1. That's escalation 2. Then here, on escalation 3, she breaks her own rules and kisses him on the mouth. And then here, he offers her to stay with him, and she decides, and to be his hidden mistress and put her up in an apartment somewhere and be his go-to, girlfriend while he continues his life and makes no constant commitment to her, other than he'll financially take care of her. So basically, instead of having 20 Johns, she has one. And here, she's offered that, and she has to say no, and they break up. Yes.
So I have a question about overall structure.
Yes.
Have you seen Memento?
Yes, but I don't. Again, I haven't seen that a lot of times. It's one of those movies you watch once, you go, "Whoa, okay."
I thought it was brilliant in the
It
terms
is.
of that. Act 3 was Act 1.
Yes.
And Act 1 was Act 3. But I struggled because
Not necessarily in that order.
right, yeah. and I struggled because the end of the movie at the very first opening sequence, and so how did you? And I wanted to dabble in trying to do something like that, starting at the end and going back to the beginning, but
Okay.
how? It's kind of the thing because I've tried that and it's like, well, this doesn't even flow. I mean, they did a good thing, or I thought he did a good thing.
He did a remarkable thing.
He used Polaroids through the entire movie.
Yes, he had something to cut to, a red herring to cut to.
Right.
Right.
But I didn't want to use the same trope that he used, because then you're just copying at that point.
Right. People who copy would call it an homage. But but that's what's going to make you brilliant. Is if you want to find a way to do it, you got to find a way to do it, and you have to find your own way. You have to be original, and you're right to not want to do what somebody else did, and you want to find a different mechanism with which to do it. And I think you're on the right track. It's just sometimes that idea doesn't come to you right away. Yes.
There are other screenwriters' books where they bring up Memento and they say, does it in fact follow this exact same, like the mystery plot? There is the revelation at the end. It's just from the past, not something we've been looking forward to in the future.
That's right.
So it does follow like exactly this kind of outline.
It does.
But I've heard in books like that one and others that, especially if someone's reading your script and they're trying to buy it, perhaps, you have like 10 pages max before you get to the big decision.
Yes.
Is that in your...
No, that's the Inciting Incident.
Oh, or sorry, the big decision or the Inciting Incident.
The Inciting Incident is 10 pages in.
And if they don't feel like that's...
Aliens Coming to Earth is going to let them read a little longer.
Okay.
And they position themselves over every capital of the world.
But no one will even go to 15 or 20 pages, in your opinion?
Well, look, I hate to tell you, I can often tell on page 1 whether a writer is any good. It's true. Because either you're engaged and they're writing an active and immersive script that's written well using active verbs to kind of propel you into the moment in the now. See, writing screenplays is very different from writing a book or an article or anything. A lot of writing methods use passive tense. But a script, the action should be written in active present tense. So I never use, for example, the word are or is or a verb ending in ing anywhere in my screenplay if I can avoid it. Once in a while, maybe there'll be 4 in an entire screenplay. But instead of saying John is standing in the doorway, I put John stands in the doorway. It creates, just even in that simple sentence, it just creates more punch, and it reads better. There are a bunch of tricks like that you can use to help it read more interactively in the present. There's also characters, when they're saying cliches and things we already know, and using dialogue we've heard before, or there's just nothing original going on. There are a million ways from the very beginning of the script. It's a situation I feel like I've seen before in another movie. This is ripped off from that. There are a million ways in which in the first page you can already tell whether somebody's good. You give them a chance, you keep reading, and you hope that this is just a weak jumping off point. If they start with somebody waking up in bed, I want to rip out my hair. Yes.
You find yourself hammering stories into this?
What do you mean?
Hammering it into the structure.
Yeah.
What
I do, for example, if I realize that on Act 2A, let's say I have a 100-page script because it's easy to break down into quarters, and I find that my midpoint isn't coming until page 60, I realize I need to cut down Act 2A by 10 pages because I'm not moving the escalations forward fast enough to keep the audience on pace for where I'm trying to go. And then sometimes you know, and if Act 2B is this many pages too short, I ask myself, oh my God, this is where the tension is supposed to be really building. How can I make the tension build higher and harder? And what can I add to it to give it a little bit more punch, a little bit more depth? Is there something I'm doing here that actually might work and personify better here that's stronger if this is too long and this is too short? You know, I try to find a balance so that the film feels like it's progressing at a good pace. Yes?
So I have a question. So say there's a story, and there's like a natural progression towards death, right? And like it's like a, I don't know, cancer story or something, right?
Sure.
So how do you structurally or make that like unique, right? Like so the audience doesn't see it coming.
Well, look, when you have a cancer story, they're going to see a life or death situation coming, and that's fine. You're going to have to decide, okay, for example, Inciting Incident is the diagnosis.
Right.
That's the moment that happens in a character's life where, holy crap, things are going to have to change. Plot point 1, or what I call escalation 2, that's the moment when they decide on a course of treatment that may be out of the ordinary. And they pick whether they're going to go through chemo or whether they're not going to do that. And they're going to go to Tibet and be with monks and try to find themselves before they die and forego all Western treatment. This is the moment that they decide how to deal with whatever it is that happened here. That's a cancer story moment. Then at the midpoint, there is going to be a moment where they realize maybe somebody else is there who has cancer. Or maybe they find out it's spread all the way to their brain and there's no way they're getting out of it. Or something like that. You know, and then here, the person who's, and then here, you know, something worse happens. Like whatever they went there to find, that falls apart. They're never going to get it and they're about to die. And then in the climax, they face death on its own terms. Or they find a way to survive, and somehow the Tibetan monks have a superpower that it's been set up throughout the whole movie that they could heal her, but they don't believe in doing that. And at the end, after you've set it up well, in the end, they decide she is worth saving given the person that she's become. You know what I mean? So you just level, you find those moments in the journey that provide these beats for you. Yes?
I wanted to go back to the Pretty Woman example.
Yes.
When, the Julia Roberts character is making these decisions.
Vivian.
She's making these decisions. Would we say that, and I don't remember the character's name, but the other hooker,
Yes.
her sidekick or reflection
Right.
character?
She's a reflection character.
Okay.
Absolutely, she's a reflection character. And because she's going to stay on the streets, she's the example of a reflection character who's not going to change. And it's why we're following our protagonist, because our protagonist had the ability to smarten up, to dress right, and pass herself off as an aristocrat. Laura San Giacomo, who played the other part, she's not going to have the savvy to be able to do that. She doesn't have... she's an absolutely wonderful, sweet, adorable character, but she doesn't have an interest in changing. And that's why she is separate from Vivian.
And so she serves the same kind of story purpose that the girl in
Emily.
Devil Wears Prada
Emily.
plays.
Yes. She's Emily. She is Han Solo.
Yes.
She is Lieutenant Weinberg, Sam Weinberg in A Few Good Men. All they serve the same plot. They're on the outer journey with the protagonist. They're supporting the protagonist's outer journey. And then they're also the one holding them responsible. It's usually the partner of the lead cop in an investigative story, like Gus in Basic Instinct, is who's his overweight partner guy. He's always saying, "Dude, you can't get involved with this woman. She's a killer." You know, somebody who, and like Laura San Giacomo's character, she's the one who says to her, "You kissed him on the mouth? What? Have you learned nothing?" Yes.
And so later on, the moment where Emily in Devil Wears Prada forgets, it's the same moment where Vivian, no.
Laura San Giacomo.
Yes.
I don't remember the character's name, and I feel bad. I feel like I should, but don't.
I don't remember anything.
I think it's Paula.
Paula?
It's Paula.
Yes.
Well, where Paula, what does she do? She asks for the money to stay with the pimp or something like that. Is that the same beat?
I'm trying to remember. Wait.
What does she do? What does Paula do? She asks her for money to give to her pimp or their pimp. She has a way out, and she doesn't take it.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
You get it. You got it. All right. Any questions on this now? All right. Now you're ready to chart your own story. The establishing prologue is the new opportunity, which is that conflict moment where you put, and remember all this is in the book, and it's the moment where you establish the protagonist's character and personality flaw. And then the catalyst moment, which is your first escalation, your inciting incident, and these are the beats. This is what I outline every single time I go before I put details in between any of this. Once I have this figured out, I can fill in the blanks in between. But these are the beats that are the spine and the backbone of 3-act structure. And I just went through them all, otherwise I'd go through them again, but I think that's redundant. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I understand you're talking about following a structure, and I genuinely do not mean to denigrate that in any sense.
Absolutely.
But some other great writers, the ones I have in mind, aren't screenwriters, but they're great writers.
Sure.
They've taken the point, like Elmore Leonard. He said he figures out a couple of characters and how to get them to push up against one another, and then he just starts writing his story, and it comes out.
He seems to make that a very successful method. He did.
And he did, but it doesn't seem that anyone in screenwriting is talking about how that's a legitimate way to develop a story.
It is a legitimate way, but you can't quantify that. That's just following your gut. You can't quantify following your gut in storytelling, and people do that. There are people who don't plan anything, and they just start writing, and if that's your thing, that's your thing.
Well, that has to be, it seems to be, that has to be because, to some extent, they have this ingrained within them.
Right.
So when they start, it just follows that outline, but they don't start with an outline first and write the story.
Not every outlining is not for everybody.
But it's the old saying, when you know the rules, you can break the rules. And I think that's when, because I'm the type myself, I make it up as I go along.
5 minutes.
I have an idea. And I have a friend who does exactly every outline, every detail.
Right.
And the funny thing is, we both get our projects done at the same time and scripts done at the same time.
I understand the fact that someone that would...
My point, put simply, is whatever works for you as a writer is how you need to do it. And they're absolutely right to do it however they need to do it to create a good story. Everybody's going to have their own process. This is just mine.
No, I understand, but what I'm really getting at is that, is it because the person that's doing this from memory, let us say, doesn't really have the opportunity or to give a presentation like this where he explains what he does because it's intuitive, because he already knows it? Is that why we don't hear people like that talking about that project, or is this just really
I've heard people talk about that process?
The best way to do it? What you're saying is it?
I will not say that mine is better than anybody else. I do not believe it. We work in an artistic medium. And for me immediately to tell anybody that any rule is set in stone and anything is right and anything is wrong makes me a frickin' hypocrite. Because I learn the rules specifically to figure out exactly where and how to break them. Yes?
I was wondering if you could speak to, when it comes to negotiating credit, the Writers Guild looks
at... The Arbitration Committee.
Yeah, they look at the structure over the story, because a lot of times they'll buy a story and then they'll kind of change it around. But the structure, if your structure can survive the final, then you can get the...
There are 4 pillars through which arbitration is made. And let's talk about this at lunch. We can talk about this because lunch is ready and I don't want it to get cold. So you and I are going to do this. Give me one more second.
I want to be there too.
You guys, I'm happy to do it. So then what I do is once I've figured out those beats, I break everything down into this method. 6 beats in Act 1 and I plot in my escalations. 6 beats for the first half, and then you fill in the independent points. 6 beats here, with the escalations always at the end of the acts, and then the 3rd act. And this is the details of plotting. So once I have the main structure, this is how I fill it in. Yes. Yes.
Yes. So your final conflict with the antagonist. That's the last 10 pages. About 10 pages, or
It is.
Page.
Okay. After Act 3, in this moment usually is where, after they realize that they've lost everything and there's nobody to choose, this is the moment that you secure personal and complete change for the protagonist so that they can go into the climax here in Escalation 5 with the new approach that will allow them to succeed. And then this usually lasts 10 pages. We need to go eat lunch while it's hot. I'll get back to the very last details of this after lunch. I don't want to wait any longer. Let's eat something.
Do you think there's a fundamental responsibility as a writer you have, like some basics beyond the nuts and bolts? Like,
yes, but I wouldn't impose my personal feelings on responsibility onto other writers.
okay.
You know, I wouldn't tell somebody else why or how or what their motivation should be for writing. I don't think that that's fair. That's the whole idea of an artistic medium and having the freedom to write about what you want. But personally, I do believe that I try to only say things in stories that I want, that I think will help make the world a better place. But that's my own code.
Do you read through?
Yes, but I charge a lot of money.
Because you can.
Because I'm a crazy detailed note giver, and it takes me a week to do notes on a script properly.
What do you charge?
$15 a page.
I'll get you 2 pages.
with a minimum of $250. But people have paid me just to look at their outlines to make sure it's ready. Yes.
When do you read?
When do I read? When the heroin kicks in. No. Just teasing. Just teasing. I do not do those things. When I get a moment, which is, you know, it takes me. When people ask me to do it and they have me do it, I give them a timeline on when I can have it done, and then at a separate time, I have if we're not in the same city or something, we do a phone call and go over it.
Well, the reason I asked is I would love for you to
How much?
read one of my scripts.
It's $33 the book.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be a couple of
Oh, the book? No.
Yes. I asked it, or you go direct.
Yeah, this link. This link.
Did you mind saying that again?
That's what I told my husband.
Oh, read it again?
Yes. I'm sorry.
No problem. HTTPS, got that?
Yes.
://
Yes.
That's short for Amazon. AMZN, period. TO, another single // and then the number 2, a capital H, capital O, capital M, capital V as in Victor, capital F as in Frank, and a lowercase g.
Okay.
Of course.
So can I bother you afterwards about possibly reading one of my scripts?
You can. You can. Okay. So this is it, and it's $33.55 to buy new. Buy used at $29.99. The hardcover is $150, so don't bother. It's no different, and the cover isn't as pretty anyway.
Look for it on eBay.
That's right. That's fine.
Right.
Thank you.
used.
Right.
$29.99. That's perfect.
I'll look for the dog ear.
All right. Any other questions on the book? Everything I've taught this morning is in the book, and then some. And to help you through it, just so you understand how the book works. The thing I don't like about a lot of books is, one, they cover way too much material, so everything is condensed, and you don't get a firm grasp on how to do it, and they don't teach you how to do what you need to do in an order that you can actually do it in. So each chapter, at the end of it, it has exercises for you to actually do that part of the process before you move on to the next chapter, and then do that part of the process. And there are exercises at the end of each exercise or question at the bottom. It gives you lists of things that you want to make sure are included in when you do it, and things that you don't want to do when you do it. When you try to do that step. Yes.
I won't say last question, but really quickly, my issue, I mean, this is truly productive. I'm just being honest. The class is, but when they critiqued my work last year here,
Mm-hmm.
all three that read it, their main thing was wrong format. And so I looked
For
online.
formatting, for a book on formatting, use the Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier. He just came out with volume 7.
Yeah.
You get number 7. And if you want to know how to do dialogue, how not to screw up your dialogue, he has a section in it called the 7 Deadly Dialogue Sins. And he is absolutely right on every one of those.
That's the book I was talking about before about Memento.
Yep.
What's the name of that again? 7 Deadly.
The 7 Deadly Dialogue Sins is the name of the passage. It really helps with dialogue. It shows you what not to do with dialogue. And then the book is called The Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier, Trottier.
Can you spell that one more time?
Trottier.
Have you met him?
Yes.
Because he does.
I was the one, he wrote the article on the 7 Deadly Sins on the internet, and he was about to publish volume 6, and I'm the one who actually told him, you got to put that in your book.
Oh.
And it's because of me that it's actually in the book.
Because he has a Sundance
Lab.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they call him Dr. Format. Yep. He's a self-appointed doctor. He's one of the good script gurus. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think he's really great. And if you're looking for really understanding the nuts and bolts of basic script formatting, he's going to give you options. I have the options that he uses that I prefer for formatting, but he sometimes gives you more than one way to do it. For me, it's always whichever format is the most straightforward and takes up the least space in your script, that's the version you should use. Whenever you're looking at formatting possibilities and he gives you a couple options, like with montages, for me, it's always, if it's a one location montage, it's montage in all caps with it underlined as part of the slug line, a space, 2 dashes, and then the regular slug line, and then you do the list of the things that happen in the montage. It's very simple, and then end montage, and then you go back. Yes? I'm sorry, does anybody else have a question?
Are there any other books that, I use, Save the Cat
by Blake Snyder.
Sid Field, which is the Bible,
It was the first 3-act structure screenplay book.
And then Michael
Haig is great, writing screenplays that sell.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenal book.
Yeah,
he was my teacher.
Yeah, I studied under him too at Webster.
Oh,
and,
wonderful.
He was at Webster teaching, and he was working on that book 26 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
When you went to UCLA, did you go, was Froeg there, or is it Froeg?
Yes, William Froeg.
Okay, because I like his books.
His book is great.
Yeah,
I still use one of his books.
I gotta find, let some borrow and never got it back,
Yeah, that's the hard thing about these books, and then they're out of print.
Yeah. But yeah, because I like his book because he actually wrote and produced, Gunsmoke or Bewitched and those things.
Yeah, he was great. He wrote great books on screenwriting. Like I said, look, read everything, and then just remember, you cannot agree with the person who wrote the book. There's no rule. Nobody's 100% right 100% of the time. Not even me. All right? I make mistakes too. I'm flawed like everybody. But I'll have ideas that can help you. And then somebody else will have other ideas that help you, and then you put together the method that works best for your creative brain and the way your brain works. Yes?
Is this a good time to ask if you
Yes.
think script contests are viable or not?
Okay. Script contests and film festivals. The truth is if you've got the money, what does it cost you other than a couple bucks? And if you think about it, if you spend $50 for an opportunity to get recognized, that's not that much to pay. But you're also, don't expect great feedback from those things, but do expect an opportunity. And the truth is that, again, it's the thing you apply to 100 so that you can get one. And then you can say festival award nominated script or festival winner, whatever. And you just do it to add it to your resume.
Have you ever put any in? Or?
One. I won it.
Oh. Which one was that?
The New Mexico International Film Festival. It was a script that I wrote. No, that's not true. I did submit my first script I ever wrote to the Nicole Fellowship, which is one of the big ones, the Nickel. And I made it to semifinals, and that was the first script. And to show you, I didn't get in, and yet that script was bought by Mike Newell, the director of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and Four Weddings and a Funeral and Donnie Brasco, and attached Dustin Hoffman to that script right after he won a second Oscar.
And you were just in the semifinals.
And I was just a semifinalist. So just understand that you can submit to these things, pay money to be submitted to these things, and that doesn't mean that they're right. Art is still an opinion-based medium. People can only think if they like it or they don't. And they may see technical skills in there that will get you into consideration, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to like horror films more than they like action films or whatever. Something's going to feel more poignant to somebody because deep down there's a place that it relates to them and they felt that script was more powerful, but really that's based on personal experiences and what they've been through. So you cannot take rejection as a personal attack on your ability. And everybody may say no, but it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't mean it's not good. At the same time, if they give you notes and you think there's room for improvement, then listen. But remember, no matter who gives you notes, it still has to go through your brain and through your hands to affect your script, so don't worry about ever getting feedback from anybody. It's never a bad thing. It just gets you to think outside the box. And just don't change things because it's a good idea. It has to fit. There are changes. A lot of times people read a script and give you ideas for changes, and you're like, that's a cool idea. But before you make that change, just because it's cool does not mean it's right for your movie. You have to funnel it and look at that, what their suggestion is, and look at it through the lens of what your premise is, and ask yourself, does that work with what I'm trying to say? Or is it just you being cool, but it's off topic? So it's not enough that they give you good ideas. They have to give you good ideas that fit your idea. And sometimes they'll give you a good idea, and what you have to realize is there's a reason why that was a good idea to you, and maybe there's a way to tweak that idea so that it does fit what it is you're writing and what you're trying to say. Yes?
What is your favorite genre?
I've been paid to write every genre. I have written feature animation for Disney feature animation. I've written horror for Universal. I try not to have favorites, but to me, my favorite thing to write is something that I either find deeply personal, that is about how I struggle all the time with low self-esteem, or quite frankly, I love escapist films. I grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek and that kind of thing, and fantasy, and I always loved that stuff because it took me out of my own head because I'm super self-critical. So I like something that feels escapist, but under all of whatever that genre is, there's something it's really saying that's super important to me. So the idea is fun with meaning. Yes?
So I've only written books, and I haven't written scripts.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a thing as voice in film?
What do you mean voice?
Where there's a piece of you that's unique that says that this film is yours.
I think every film is that way. It has to be. Nobody else can write the story the way you would write it. Your voice is the way you tell your story and the situations you employ to say what it is you have to say. Everybody talks about the writer's voice and how important it is. What it really means is that you have a perspective on the world and your story engages us in that sense. But I find that following technical rules helps me get across the ideas and what I want to say and what's personal about me in the most effective manner so that people are understanding what it is I'm saying. So I believe a lot of it's voice because it's personal opinion. Premise is an opinion. It's a hypothesis, but it's an opinion. And there has to be contrary opinion. That is your voice. What it is you have to say, that's all you. And they can't rip that out of there without changing the ending. Yes?
But in terms of voice, when you are actually constructing the words, when you're wordsmithing, does that matter? Or because, in a novel...
I think it does.
So using, like, the way you turn a phrase or use a metaphor or...
I don't use metaphors.
Right, and so...
And I don't use similes, and I don't use conclusions. You can't use conclusions. There are three things in a script. Slug lines that give you the scene location, inside or outside, and day or night. There are the action lines, which is everything you see on screen. It's only what you physically see on screen. And three is dialogue, which is what we hear. That's it. Those are the three vehicles through which you can convey your story. Nothing else goes in there. A simile, when somebody uses a simile, it's because they haven't figured out the right words to describe what's really going on. I don't use adverbs in my scripts because an adverb is just somebody's way of being lazy about what actual verb you should be using. It can't be shut the door hard, they slam the door.
Oh,
You know?
sure.
There's always a right word for it. The question is whether you as a writer take the time to pick your brain or thesaurus it out and figure out what that word is. Don't be lazy. Every word counts, so yes, every line counts. At least to me it does.
would similes be okay in children's books? To
Well,
help
yeah,
with-
I'm just talking about screenplays.
Yeah, I know.
And in children, I don't pretend to be able to teach children's books or books in general. Book writing is not my gig. I wrote this one book, and that's it. So, you know, I already know what I want to write for my second book because the book there haven't been a good version of how to instruct screenwriters on how to edit their scripts. I've read a lot of them. There are some that are decent, but none of them are really great. And none of them give you a good mathematical, technical way of going through and having a checklist of what to do to make sure it's bulletproof. So that's my next book.
Can you repeat what you said, the action?
The three things. Action lines are what you physically see happen on the screen. No conclusions, no information, no metaphors, no similes. It's just what we see. And then dialogue is what we hear. And then follow the rules of bad dialogue, of what not to do, from David Charnier's book. And if you don't want to buy the whole book, just look up 7 Deadly Dialogue Sins, and you'll find an article somewhere. It's been published everywhere. 7 Deadly Dialogue Sins, that article is online somewhere.
Could you say something about the slug line?
The subline,
Yeah, slug
The three things that you talked about.
interior, exterior, the physical location, and whether it's day or night.
Do you use voiceover?
I find voiceovers often used poorly, just like flashbacks, so a lot of people say they don't like them and don't use them. Those people don't understand how they're used and why you use them. Yes, voiceover is usable. Yes, it can be great. If you want to look at examples on how to use it, look at the old noir films like The Big Sleep or Double Indemnity. Frickin' brilliant. Modern noir films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang do it incredibly well. The key to great voiceover is that it has to provide a completely contrary view to what you're seeing. And it reveals the voice of a character that is completely unique to the audience. So if you're not having the character speak in a voiceover that is incredibly unique, and it's not revealing some kind of information that you cannot possibly get from the visuals and the dialogue, you are using it incorrectly. It's voiceover must be used to add a layer of personality to the moments.
A river runs through it.
I don't remember, I'll be honest.
Untapped by water.
Okay, you love
The
it?
last line, I loved it.
All right, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Boom. I'll say yes. So yes, voiceover, but people, there's a backlash because people use voiceover horribly bad in scripts a lot of the time. Like they'll literally be saying, you describe a scene, and then the voiceover is describing what you just told us in the actual action line. Or they're not using an original kind of sounding voice to tell that story. You know, it's not providing perspective into the moment that creates a layer of conflict in the moment. You know, which great voiceover provides a layer of depth and perception that you don't get just from watching the scene, and it's very hard to do. I honestly rarely ever employ it because it's something to really be wary of. Because unless you nail it, people are just going to say, "Don't use voiceover," and they'll think you're not a great writer. You know, it's something that even I look at warily to use, even though I know it's a fantastic tool. And only when I use it is when I know I can hit it out of the park with the concept of giving a unique voice that adds conflict for having that voice, and it's different from or even the opposite of everything you're seeing.
So it's like father giving his son a fishing pole, and then the voiceover is dad was a drunken maniac.
Yes, exactly. He was that pig. It's just like he wants to go to heathen, going and catching fish ourselves.
Yeah.
Freaking ridiculous. You know, that's the voiceover. And in the scene, he's like, "Thanks, Dad."
Yeah.
And then in his head, asshole, monster. You know, taking a kid hunting, you can do that. You know, it's you know, two people are fighting vehemently, and then the voiceover is, "God, I love that guy."
Yeah.
You know, it adds a layer of pathos. If it's not adding something totally different from what you're getting, never use it. But it's a great question, because everybody in Hollywood's in a no voiceover, no flashbacks kick because of the fact that so many people do it wrong and they don't understand how you're supposed to do it. And the problem is that most of the people who work behind the scenes in developing projects didn't go to film or screenwriting school, so they don't understand why they don't work. They don't understand the mechanics. They just can say, it's boring, it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything for me. And they make a blanket opinion of something because they weren't taught. A lot of writers weren't taught, and a lot of readers weren't taught how to use specific tools for specific reasons and what they're there for. It's like people throw in a love interest into a story because they think you're supposed to have a love interest, but all they do is throw in a token love interest to be a trophy for someone to win at the end of the story, but they have no depth. They're not helping change the protagonist. They're not using the character to its full potential. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with voiceover. Everything has a job, and the key is to realize, why is that tool used and what does it do? Okay, so does anybody have questions on this? Yes?
I was wondering if now is a good time to call back to my previous question. A little bit different than a topic than we were on, but about credits, about writing credits.
Mm-hmm.
If you are hired to do a rewrite and you are rewriting a script that was adapted from a short story,
Yes.
but the producer of that script purchased the rights.
Right. It's a script and you're being offered to rewrite it, and you're asking, how do you protect yourself as one of the writers? You can register at the Writers Guild. If it's an original piece of material, then you should... I love the Writers Guild. Let me just say that. But if you're going to protect a piece of an original piece of work, use the Copyright Office. That protects you legally. Okay? The libraryofcongress.org. And register it there, because that's professional ownership. What you do with the Writers Guild when you register something there, they're saying they'll vouch for the fact that you turned it into them on this date, and therefore you must have written it. There's nothing legal about that. You might as well send the script to yourself in a self-addressed stamped envelope. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to have double protection or whatever, and it's a great way to do it if you're being hired for a rewrite, because you won't get a copyright because it's not your original material. So you do the copyright though if it's original, because that protects you legally in a court of law.
Ask for a treatment. Do you register the treatment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because, first of all, they pay you for the treatment.
Yes.
And then when they pay you for the treatment, you'll keep that contract and make sure you save that on a file. And then you'll save it on a file in the cloud in case your computer goes up in flames somehow or breaks down. And then, so you have that to register that. And then you also register at the... you may wait to do the Library of Congress until afterwards. It's like $50. But it depends. But yeah, I would... Or in your case, the Writers Guild, it's only $20. $10 once you're a member.
And you recommend all of that protection, holding on to that information, keeping those emails up in the cloud. If you have an agent who is a talent agent but not a literary agent, negotiating your contract on your behalf.
Dangerous.
Okay.
Because they don't know what to ask for. That's not their forte.
Yeah.
Get what I do is I would get a entertainment attorney, and when you get a good entertainment attorney, if you're getting paid enough, now depending on what you're being paid, it may not be worth it to them. But when I get paid, I'm getting paid a sum that says, and I don't have to pay them a fee to go over the stuff, to note the contract. You pay them a percentage. Like you pay an agent 10%, you pay a manager 10%, you pay a lawyer 5% of your deal. And you let them protect you in the wording. I would rather have a lawyer, an entertainment attorney who does literary contracts for 5% additional than having a talent agent do it, unless his talent agency has a literary department and it's the literary lawyers at the talent agency who are going through the contract for you, not the talent agent. Because a lot of agencies have a literary, a legal division, and they give it to lawyers to do notes. Any other questions? All right. So everybody understood this, right? And then the key to understanding that was there's 6 developments per quarter of your script concept. Each development should take 3 to 5 pages of script. That guarantees you that it's going to be the right length. And then you have quarter climaxes, as we discussed, that are the escalation points. And that's my book! All right.